are listening to Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, wilmingtonbigtalker.com, and my name is Paul Vallone. I would like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies. A grassroots collection of people from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. In today's episode, we have as our honored guest renowned Second Amendment attorney David T. Hardy, whose most recent book, one of many, I should note, is called I'm from the Government and I'm Here to Kill You: The True Human Cost of Official Negligence. God, I love that title. I'm from the Government and I'm Here to Kill You. We're going to talk about Waco and Ruby Ridge and Fast and Furious, and a few bits of information David unearthed that you probably don't know. But first, let's take a quick look at the week's gun rights news. First, we have Michael Bloomberg, too clever by half. As you may know, Mayor Big Gulp, the billionaire megalomaniac and former New York City mayor who once banned large sugary drinks in his city and has now pledged $50 million per year to ban guns and generally tell you how to live your life, has been bankrolling multi-million-dollar ballot initiatives for universal gun registration, which he calls universal background checks. Bloomberg was successful in passing one ballot initiative in Washington state. He failed in Maine, but then succeeded in Nevada. Well, according to an excellent article in the Elko Daily Free Press in Nevada, Bloomberg has a little problem. It seems his attempt to fool voters over the exact cost of his proposal has backfired. In order to minimize the apparent cost of doing background checks for private transfers, and that's what it involved, doing NICS checks or the equivalent thereof on all transfers, even on an inheritance or a gift to your children, apparently his minions wrote the law to prohibit the use of the state's computerized background check system. They have their own system in Nevada. So to minimize the cost, he mandated instead that it would use the FBI National Instant Background Check System, or NICS. The problem is that the FBI maintains that state law can't mandate how the feds spend their money, so they are refusing to do the required background checks. And apparently the Attorney General of the state, with much applause from the gun rights movement, has called the law unenforceable. Now, however, the Bloomies are suing the governor to enforce the bill, essentially demanding that courts rewrite the ballot initiative in a way that they didn't, namely a way that might have been rejected by voters. Let's just hope the judge, in this case, is not an Obama appointee. And by the way, the Elko Daily Free Press also correctly notes that the Universal Background Check Initiative would not have made a difference in the Las Vegas shootings, since the shooter passed background checks for all of the guns he used. Elsewhere, who knew that bump stocks could be used as footballs? Because happily, Congress and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives are playing political football with the proposed bump stock ban. Last week, Speaker Paul Ryan, Republican from Wisconsin, echoed calls from the NRA for the BATFE to do something, namely something regulatory, when he said, "We think the regulatory fix is the smartest, quickest fix." But, according to the Washington Examiner, the BATFE doesn't agree. The paper recently quoted a congressional aide as saying the BATFE is pushing for a legislative approach rather than going through the administrative process. I guess this kind of harkens back to the heady days of the federal government shutdown when the liberals were screaming about governmental gridlock, and I responded that when it comes to the government, gridlock is good. Meanwhile, you need to keep hammering your U.S. congressmen and both senators with the message that no gun control is acceptable. To find who represents you, go to whoismyrepresentative.com. Again, that is whoismyrepresentative.com. So, are you tired of the usual gun control prattle about common sense gun laws and closing loopholes and keeping guns out of the wrong hands? Well, you're going to love this novel twist, I guess it is, on gun control from Becky Sirtas, the head of the group which was once known as North Carolinians for Gun Control, but is now the kinder and gentler North Carolinians Against Gun Violence. Writing in the Raleigh News and Observer, that's the paper I call Pravda, official organ of the Communist Party, Becky has authored a piece titled, listen carefully, "Real Liberty for All Means Gun Limits." No, that is not a joke. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. Yep, that was, let me look at that again. Real liberty for all means more gun limits. Okay. Here is what Becky asks, and I quote, "Which poses a greater threat to our nation's freedom and liberty? The fear that now regularly grips tens of millions of Americans as they contemplate the risk of violence every time they enter a concert, sports arena, or theater, or the requirement that a small percentage of our citizens, parentheses, gun owners and would-be gun owners, endure the kind of limitations everyone endures when obtaining a driver's license and or registering an automobile." The inevitable part, of course, is the next line, and that's, quote, "Of course, banning or heavily regulating bump stocks is an important first step, but it barely scratches the surface of what's needed to address our gun violence epidemic." Then she goes on to give the usual laundry list of gun bans, of course. But you gotta give the girl credit for chutzpah. Yes, sirree, that's the ticket. Unconstitutional infringement of your right to keep and bear arms in the interest of strengthening liberty. Becky has apparently borrowed a theme from the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's novel 1984. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. In other news, NRA spokesman and nationally syndicated radio host Dana Loesch has the liberals peeing themselves again. The latest NRA ad blasts the backbiters trying to take down Donald Trump and undermine the legitimacy of the lawfully elected president, correctly describing the left's attempt to tear down American institutions and to replace them with what can only be called communism. And amid images of leftists rioting and burning, Loesch says, "No, their fate will be failure, and they will perish in the political flames of their own fires." God, that's beautiful. I wish I'd written that. Anyways, this is, of course, denounced by the leftists of Media Matters as laden with violent innuendo, and by others as an incitement to violence. Those who know me know I have a problem with some of the things that the NRA does, but God bless them, their ads are spot on. Go get 'em, Dana. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, wilmingtonbigtalker.com. My name is Paul Vallone. I'm your host. I hope you will join us after the break when we rejoin our show with our guest, David T. Hardy, Second Amendment attorney and author, with his book, I'm from the Government and I'm Here to Kill You, The True Human Cost of Official Negligence. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, wilmingtonbigtalker.com. Today we have as our guest attorney and Second Amendment advocate David T. Hardy, whose most recent book is, and I love this title, I'm from the Government and I'm Here to Kill You, the true human cost of official negligence. David Hardy is an attorney practicing in Tucson, Arizona. Prior to returning to private practice, he spent 10 years in Washington, D.C. as a career attorney in the Interior Department's Office of the Solicitor. Mr. Hardy has previously published 4 books, including another personal favorite of mine, Michael Moore is a Big Fat Stupid White Man, which, unsurprisingly, made number 1 on Amazon and spent 7 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. Others of his books include The Origins and Development of the Second Amendment, The BATF's War on Civil Liberties, and This Is Not an Assault, Penetrating the Web of Official Lies Regarding the Waco Incident, which we will talk about at some length. Hardy has also published 25 law review articles, which have been twice cited by the United States Supreme Court and by 11 of the 13 U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeals. He has appeared on ABC Nightline, The O'Reilly Factor, Fox News, Court TV, and over 100 radio programs. His investigative work on the Waco tragedy was documented in the New York Times, the Houston Chronicle, and the Dallas Morning News. On the side, Mr. Hardy says he has kept bees, shoveled in the mines, survived cancer, and been bitten by a rattlesnake. Ooh, I really don't envy you the last one especially. And he says he does not plan to resume these activities in the future. Little wonder. As I say, David's most recent book is I'm from the Government, I'm Here to Kill You. Welcome, David.
Oh, hey, happy to be here.
Well, I know you've been widely cited as a Second Amendment advocate. In fact, as I recall, you have a website entitled Arms and the Law, where I found several of your excellent law review articles on the Second Amendment, some of which I understand were quoted by Justice Clarence Thomas in McDonald versus Chicago. Before we get on to the main topic, can you tell us a little bit about that website and what exactly you're doing?
Well, it's armsandlaw.com, and it's essentially a gun law blog devoted to any developments in the field of gun law and occasionally gun politics. I've had it there since 2005 or thereabouts, and it gets about 1,000 hits a day, give or take.
Okay. An excellent resource for anybody who wants to know the recent, Second Amendment scholarship, I would say. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I try to keep it up in my spare time anyway.
Good deal. Now, as I said, I love the title of your book, perhaps second only to Michael Moore is a Big Fat Stupid White Man. Tell us what motivated you to write, I'm from the Government, I'm Here to Kill You.
Well, it's mostly just a sense of injustice. I mean, I've worked for the government. I've seen it from the inside. I spent most of my remaining years suing the government in one capacity or another. And it was just appalling to me how the legal system is stacked such that the federal government can get away with almost anything, including killing people. The legal burdens are very difficult to surmount. The government has rights to secrecy that no private citizen would ever claim. And just generally, time after time, I've seen the average citizen get harmed or even killed, and the government dust its hands and walk away and say, so sue us. And if you sue, odds are not in your favor. So in the end, and that what I saw within the government in terms of, quote unquote public servants who don't serve the public at all. They protect their agency, and if that requires shafting you, they'll do it in a heartbeat.
Perish the thought that the governmental bureaucrats might protect their own butts rather than you. I would never have assumed such a thing.
Yeah, it's sort of a blow at the idea of the administrative state, which is the heart of quote unquote progressive thinking. And the core assumption of that is that when you or I make decisions regarding anything, including the education of our children, those decisions will be probably incompetent and certainly selfish and not have an eye to the greater good of the greater number. Whereas if you have a government official, it will be otherwise. He'll be a public servant who will act in altruistically and intelligently since he's been trained and chosen for it.
No.
BS. The whole book is calling BS on that.
Well, so what you're basically saying is the whole liberal notion of large government taking care of you is essentially at odds with the basic fundamentals of human nature. Would that be a fair statement? Yes. The idea that you could take a human being and this person will be selfish and incompetent, but now we'll make him a government official and suddenly he won't be. BS. Come on. The same human being, you just gave him a bunch of power and no responsibility. And that is an important factor, no responsibility, because as I'm sure you have noted, in almost all of these cases, these are not elected officials. They are rather appointed bureaucrats who respond to someone other than you and I, Joe Public, right?
Yeah, the federal government, if you stop to think about its design, was designed for a very tiny government. I think the first Department of State headquarters had 8 people in it, including the secretary. So it's designed as basically the size of a small-town government. So you didn't have to worry about responsibility because you could write George Washington, and he probably knew what had happened, and he'd go down there and fire the guy. Not so today when you've got 1 million to 2 million employees, and the only ones we get to vote for are the president and vice president, who probably have no idea what that employee just did to you and no way of finding out.
Yeah, that is essentially the whole premise of essentially why I got involved in the gun rights movement, but that's another story. So tell us, and we're going to talk a lot about Waco. Maybe you could talk about it now if you like, but what have you found to be the most egregious of the government's deliberate malfeasance that you have documented?
Well, Waco was it. It beats out Fast and Furious and the other things by a long shot. Not just the body count. We're talking about 100 or so people killed. They're on the first day's raid when ATF went in on February 28th, or on the day of the fire, April 19th, 1993. Just to start out with, the whole raid was unnecessary. They claimed they couldn't arrest Koresh peacefully away from the building because they didn't know what he looked like, and he never left the building anyways. He was a paranoid recluse. Well, they had undercover agents across the street from the Davidian place in what came to be known as the undercover house. It's open country, so you get this building that was the Davidian place, and across the street was a duplex. And any of the buildings you see are on the horizon. Well, I found out what the agents in the undercover house did 9 days before the big bloody raid and shootout, dealing with this Koresh who they supposedly didn't know what he looked like and he never left the building. The agents in the undercover house went shooting with David Koresh.
You're kidding me.
I'm serious. And I've got a reproduction of their report in the book. I've also got it on a webpage I've established, which is officialnegligence.com. You can go there to the tab on officialnegligence.com, the tab for video, etc., and you'll see the report of the agents in the undercover house, signed by their superiors. They went out And David Koresh.
Why did this never become public? Hang on just a second. I want to hear the rest of this too, but I don't recall even hearing that. And I mean, I was fairly up on the Waco debate back in the 1990s, and I knew some of the people involved in the investigation. I don't recall hearing that.
Well, you didn't. The official reports were all, they didn't know what he looked like, and he never left the building. I only found it because I engaged in a 3-year Freedom of Information Act suit, and they coughed it up by accident.
Oh, God bless people like you and people like you who have the doggedness to go after these records. That has to be a Herculean task, I would think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they went out there, and Koresh said, oh, sure, you can go shooting out in that open land. I got a bunch of ammunition for those AR-15s. I'll come with you. So they're going out in the field. Koresh is carrying the ammunition. He's unarmed until Agent Rodriguez loaned Koresh his .38 Super so he'd have something to shoot. Right? They're all 3 agents, and Koresh with one of his friends, and the agents are the only ones with guns, but they couldn't arrest him somehow.
Oh, my. I can't even... That's just, It's difficult for me to fathom. I'll tell you what, since we're on Waco, we'll probably stay on discussing Waco, and I do want to talk about Fast and Furious in just a moment. But for right now, we need to take a break. Folks, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, wilmingtonbigtalker.com. Please join us after the break when we will rejoin our guest, attorney and Second Amendment advocate David T. Hardy, whose most recent book is I'm from the Government, I'm Here to Kill You. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, wilmingtonbigtalker.com. Today we have as our guest attorney and Second Amendment advocate David T. Hardy, whose most recent book is I'm from the Government and I'm Here to Kill You. David, you were talking about the huge malfeasance at Waco. You mentioned how they claimed the raid was necessary because they couldn't recognize David Koresh, yet you documented something unknown before, namely that they had gone shooting with the guy, so they knew exactly who he was. Go ahead and continue telling us about Waco and what transpired there.
Well, I've got in the book and also on the webpage, officialnegligence.com, the soundtracks from the radio, soundtracks from the ATF raid and shootout, and also from the FBI radio traffic net during the fire. And the latter is pretty shocking because as the place is going up in flames, being filmed from the FBI aircraft, you hear the two top dogs FBI talking, and the one at the scene, head of the HRT, is calling for fire engines. And he's getting really desperate. And his boss, who is up the road about a mile away and is in fact holding up the fire engines, refusing to let him pass the checkpoint, is silent until finally his boss comes in and asks coldly, are people focused on the school bus area for the kids? Is that what we're doing? And the guy on the scene says, that's what we're trying to do. And his boss says, they're the only ones, I hope.
Oh, my.
I've got it on the web page. Just look at it, and there's the voice. And there's silence. And then the guy at the scene starts screaming for fire engines again, so loud he overloads the microphone. And there's no reply until one of his agents comes on and says, there's no fire engines at the T, which is a road junction, meaning they're still being held up. And the building continues to burn as you're watching and listening to all this.
I mean, is there any logical reason that they could have held up fire engines, some safety reason, something else?
Well, that's what he tried to claim. The boss tried to claim, well, we were worried they'd shoot the firemen. Yeah, sure. I mean, the guy at the scene is calling for them. He's the one who knows whether it's safe or not. And you're sitting a mile away, but no. I mean, the real reason was pretty simple. As far as they were concerned, these were federal cop killers, and if they all burned, tough luck. You can try to get the children out, but as far as the women and men, let them burn.
Lovely. Okay. And to this day, and as I said, I knew someone who was involved in investigating Waco, and what I heard at the time was horrific enough. And you've gone to great lengths and difficulties to unearth other documents, I guess under the Freedom of Information Act, that have come to light since then. Is that correct?
Yes, quite a few documents. The whole bunch of things you realize. I've got videos from inside the raid headquarters before the raid went down, the first day's raid, and everybody's goofing off. They don't look like they didn't expect a firefight. They're goofing off. They're taking souvenir photos of each other. You know, one guy's reading the funny papers Sunday morning. It was going to be a big publicity raid. They'd go out there. They'd look really dramatic. 3 helicopters would buzz the building. They'd all charge into place, and then they'd search the place. It's supposed to look dramatic and dangerous, but it wasn't supposed to be. Some of the agents who went in, one of them went in with an AR-15 and only one magazine for it. It was all for show.
Okay. And are you saying the Branch Davidians knew this beforehand, or I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're saying.
You mean knew? They knew on the eve of the raid. Well, about 2 hours before the raid van showed up, they knew.
Okay.
And what's interesting is the ATF sent over one guy. Robert Rodriguez, undercover guy, to find out if they knew they were coming. Well, while he was there, Koresh got the message they were coming. And Koresh went out, and he said, Koresh looked at him, and he knew that Koresh knew he was an undercover man. And Koresh just shook his hand and said, good luck, and let him go away. And we know that Koresh knew he was undercover because Koresh called 911 during the raid, called him twice. And the first time he starts in with, this guy's supposed to be some fanatic, right? He starts in with, now what'd you go and do that for? Now there's some of my people dead and there's some of your people dead, and it's your fault.
Oh, my.
He wasn't looking forward to this. He's saying things went wrong, and you caused it, dang it. And in the second conversation, after he's been shot, he said, all of our guns are legal. We had them all on yellow sheets, the 4473s. And he says, that's what I told Robert, the undercover guy. You know, Robert, the guy you sent out here. He knew he was undercover.
Okay. This doesn't exactly paint the portrait of an especially dangerous group of people.
No. I mean, they were split off from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. These weren't a bunch of fanatics. They were a bunch of guys who were sitting out there in the middle of open country and suddenly find this major military caravan sweeping down on them, and are wondering what in the heck is going on.
Pretty much bothering no one. That's a pretty sobering thought for anybody that happens to be a prepper living out in God's country someplace.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, also I've got up there the audio from one of the Davidians, Wayne. Now he slips my name. Wayne Martin, the attorney. He calls 911 as the firefight is breaking out, and he's screaming, "Make them stop! They're shooting us up at Mount Carmel. You know, we're surrounded by people. They're shooting at us. Make them stop!" He keeps screaming, "Make them stop!" I mean, no, they weren't looking for a firefight. They were surprised and shocked.
Okay. On a different note, or different but related note at the same period of time, Ruby Ridge. Okay, that's another area you cover, and another area of huge government malfeasance, I believe. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Ruby Ridge is Chapter 3, if I remember, of I'm from the government and I'm here to kill you. Basically, Randy Weaver was a separatist living up in the north end of Idaho. He built a cabin up there about 2 miles from a general store and about 5 miles from a small town. And he was living with his family and a friend named Kevin Harris. And, they weren't bothering anybody. They were minding their own business. And ATF decided it needed an informant. And when he refused to serve as an informant, they set him up. He was desperate for money and offered to sell a guy who turned out to be an ATF informant a couple of shotguns. and legal transaction. But the informant said he'd pay him like 2 or 3 times their value if Weaver would cut the barrels to about 12 inches. Mm-hmm. So he was basically entrapped. They put the idea in his head, dangled the money in front of his nose. He cut the barrels off, and presto, we have an informant. So they arrested him. And he got the wrong date to show up for a court trial and didn't show up. And now, all of a sudden, within the bureaucracy, he becomes this monster. Why, he had special forces training. Must be some sort of Rambo. And he just watches it escalates from this guy sitting up in a cabin bothering nobody to this man is a Rambo. He probably laid minefields around the cabin. He may have underground bunkers, all of which were BS. Yeah. So they went up there. Some federal rangers, marshals went up there to reconnoiter, and I think to shoot the dogs who were their burglar alarm system. They got the dogs to chasing them, and the Weavers came down thinking the dogs were chasing game. Winter coming on, a deer or a bear was something you really wanted. The dog caught up with them, and there's profound disagreement as to what happened. But the best reconstruction is one of the marshals shot the dog. Randy Weaver's 14-year-old son, Sammy, was apparently within seeing range, shouted, "You killed my dog," and fired a shot at the marshal. And I might add that there's no way to know they were marshals. They're just guys who are clad in camouflage with rifles. Missed the marshal. They fired back, hit Sammy in the arm, seriously damaged his arm, destroyed his rifle. He turned to run, and one of them shot him in the back, killed him. Kevin Harris, at that point, fired. They were so close he fired from the hip with a .30-06 and hit one of the marshals and killed him. Then everybody retreated. Now, Randy Weaver himself hadn't even seen this happen. He was out of sight. So they retreat. FBI swings in the hostage rescue team, which is their sort of super SWAT team, on a military aircraft. They come up. They surround the cabin. The people inside don't even know that FBI is there. As far as they're concerned, the government retreated yesterday, and they've heard nothing since. They give them illegal orders.
David, I'm going to stop you with illegal orders. We want to hear about that after the break. Right now, we're going to take a break. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7. And we're going to come back just after the break with our guest and attorney and Second Amendment advocate David T. Hardy and his book, I'm from the Government, I'm Here to Kill You. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, WilmingtonBigTalker.com, 106.7. Today we have as our guest attorney and Second Amendment advocate David T. Hardy, whose most recent book is I'm from the Government, I'm Here to Kill You. We are now talking about the government malfeasance at Ruby Ridge. And David, please pick up where you left off, if you could.
Sure. Well, the FBI snipers had the Weaver cabin surrounded, but the Weavers didn't know they were there. The snipers were given a plainly illegal order. Now, law enforcement has pretty much the same self-defense powers that you or I have. If the person is putting someone in danger of loss of life or serious bodily injury, you can shoot. Well, the orders were instead to shoot on sight. If any, even before they announced we are the FBI, we're here, if you saw a male outside the cabin with a firearm, you could shoot him on sight.
Shoot on sight. Is that legal under any circumstances in United States law domestically?
No. That's a violation of the Constitution as well as of local statute. That's murder.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to establish that. Continue, please.
So they were ordered to commit murder, and when Weaver and Harris, his friend, left the building together with Weaver's daughter, and they were going to an outbuilding where they'd put the body of Sammy, who'd been shot by the marshal. Well, one of the snipers, Lon Horiuchi, took the shot and hit Weaver in the arm. Weaver and everybody with his daughter in the tail went running for the cabin to take cover. His daughter said that she figured she would come up the rear since they were going to hit her father. They were going to have to hit her first. So he's coming toward the cabin. His wife, Vicki Weaver, is holding the door to the cabin open. Now, the sniper isn't at 90 degrees to the door. He's way off to the side in the direction that the door opened. So the door's sort of blocking part of his view. It's got windows at the top. And he took a shot, and he hit Vicki Weaver in the throat-chin area and basically blew her throat out while holding her child. And she collapsed
Holding the
and died
baby.
right there. Yeah. He missed the baby by probably 6 inches.
Okay, so can we chalk this off to an accident? I mean, how does that become malfeasance exactly?
Yeah, when you put crosshairs on a person and pull the trigger, it's not an accident. But he had no authority to make the shot. I mean, it was an illegal shot. And afterward, when they put Weaver on trial, Brandy Weaver, and at trial they tried to hide a sketch that the sniper Horyushi had made. They finally had to cough it up in the middle of the trial. And what it shows the door being held open, a man running toward it but not yet reaching it. But in the top of the door, the windows, you can see two heads, the tops of two heads. So he knew someone was behind that door at the moment he fired a shot through the door because he was leading the running man. He put a shot right through the door, which meant he was firing on someone who wasn't involved, essentially.
Deliberately, and he knew they were there. And as you say, this evidence was hidden from the public during the trial. Is that right?
Yep. The government finally coughed it up. They mailed it from FBI headquarters, the sketch. They mailed it fourth class, deliberately meaning it not to arrive until after the trial was over, but it got there one day too soon. And the prosecutor had to cough it up. And then they recalled the sniper to the stand and had another go at him. And in the end, the jury acquitted everybody of everything. And I might add, they charged conspiracy to commit murder, and they sought the death penalty against Randy Weaver. And they're hiding evidence. Well, in the end,
the government is hiding evidence. They have killed his son and his wife in an illegal raid, and they're charging him with murder. Is that what you're telling me? Yes,
exactly. And in the end, the jury acquitted Kevin Harris of everything and acquitted Randy Weaver of everything except failing to show up for the court date.
All right.
The least significant charge. So, and then
that's quite a story. And you said Lon Horyuchi. That name rings a bell. Wasn't there something else about Lon Horyuchi?
Well, he was present at the Waco raid.
He was in both places. He's dealt death a number of times illegally. Please tell me more.
Well, there are reports, I haven't seen confirmed, that his voice is the one you hear on the radio traffic calling the word compromise. And compromise was a code word for the Davidians have fired at the tanks, like that makes a lot of difference. Therefore, accelerate the tear gassing. Just basically blast the place with all the tear gas or CS gas you have.
Which was actually what started the fires, was it not?
We'll never know exactly, but it probably accelerated the fire.
Okay.
I think what caused it was they were firing, although they denied it for many years, they were firing what are called pyrotechnic gas projectiles, which use a gunpowder-like mixture to expel the tear gas, which is dust. And those, the containers warned, do not use against buildings. Use in open fields only, not against buildings. They start fires.
Okay. All right. In the interest of keeping on our time schedule here, the latest malfeasance under a different administration, an equally anti-democratic administration, namely Fast and Furious. What about that? We hear a lot about it, but what really happened there?
Well, it looks as though the local U.S. attorney here in Arizona, who had made a career off pushing assault weapon bans, he boasted of having written up the first one for Senator DeConcini as a staffer. Looked like he and the local ATF decided they were going to help the pitch the pitch being Hillary Clinton and Obama, claiming that we need more gun control because American guns are winding up in Mexican crime scenes and crime cartel scenes. So the plan was, we'll help out by seeing that we ship 2,000 guns to Mexican drug cartels, and they'll turn up at Mexican crime scenes. And I could document
which they did.
Yeah.
And in the United States.
Yeah, they were rejoicing. One ATF supervisor threatened his subordinates who were saying, we didn't sign up to run guns to cartels. And he said something about, if you don't enjoy this, you should be in a different line of business.
Oh, my.
So, yeah, I mean, they were enjoying it. Guns are turning up at crime cartel scenes. People are getting murdered. Great. Until one of them was used to murder an American Border Patrol agent, Brian Terry. Then it started getting out of hand.
And then the cover-up began, did it not, in earnest?
Oh, yeah. I mean, down to one of the guys in the White House who knew stuff suddenly was shipped off to a civilian post in Iraq during the middle of the congressional hearings. Strange.
Oh, I didn't know that. I never heard that, actually. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And another one took a job with some overseas corporation, and although he remained on the ATF payroll, which is pretty much illegal, he took a private job, too, and went to, I believe, Singapore.
Oh, my. Now, I remember during this period of time just being incensed that Eric Holder was the one screaming for a ban on so-called assault weapons, which really don't exist. We're talking about semi-automatic firearms. He's screaming for this ban at precisely the moment, and by the way, the excuse he was using was that these guns are being smuggled from Mexico, and he is doing this at precisely the moment that they are themselves smuggling guns to Mexico, which are making it back across our border. Would that be a fair statement?
Oh, yeah. And, they're doing this to run up the number of guns seized at Mexican scenes. This is essentially a government agency declaring war on another country. I mean, you're arming an insurgency. That's an act of war. And an agency did it and walked away with no consequences. So, hey, the swamp is out of control.
Well, no consequences. Didn't they wind up holding Eric Holder in contempt of Congress? Big deal.
Yeah. Have you seen him get convicted or go to jail? No.
That's why it led me to call it the Eric Holder Department of Injustice.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, at one point, the head of ATF, Melson, met secretly with congressional attorneys because he couldn't trust his Department of Justice attorneys to look out for him. He figured they were setting him up to be the fall guy.
Incredibly dirty, and apparently from some of the breaking news recently, this administration was dirtier than we even know. I'm going to have to wrap it up here, David, but first, tell everybody, do some shameless self-promotion here. How can we get your book?
The easiest way is if you go to officialnegligence.com. I've got links to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and if you go through that site, I get 80 cents per copy kickback. But you can also go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com and just look for I'm from the government and I'm here to kill you.
Officialnegligence.com. Well, thank you very much, David. We appreciate having you.
Sure.
And my name is Paul Vallone. You have been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I also encourage you to check out my website at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, spell out that A-N-D, gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, where you can find my writings and earlier editions of the show. See you Sunday at 5.